Well, friend, with this, let me start. Again, I want to good morning, everyone, and I hope all of you are having a good time. Now, we welcome you to the second session of PDPP, Professional Diploma in Public Procurement. Now, before I go to the focus of today's session, let me go back to the last session which we had last week. You may recall that during the last session, we covered Introduction to Procurement and Public Procurement. We emphasize what is procurement, why it is important, what are the difference between private sector procurement and public sector procurement. Although the final objective is same, to achieve value for money, but still the focus is different. We said that the major focus of public procurement was to create transparencies. In addition to value for money, to take care of social objectives. Those were the issues which we had around. Since it's a public funds, it's always under the scanner eyes. Now, we also said in the last session that there's a need to have a framework. When public procurement is a big business, and we said it's 25% of the India's GDP, which is around $500 billion, yearly spent by under the public procurement. Public procurement means done by the ministries, done by the public sectors, done by the local state governments, undertaken by the municipalities, panchayat, whatever you may call in the whole spectrum. It's a big business. So naturally a country of this size, complexity of procurement, the size of the procurement, we discussed last time there's a need to have a framework. So in the framework, what we discussed last time was the key principle. So today's focus will be going much more in detail about the framework. So the focus of today's session, as you can see with the name, Public Procurement Framework in India. But those even who are from outside, they can also correlate this in their day-to-day life. So we're going to talk about a country of this size, the volume of this size of public procurement. You need a framework. Who decides the framework? What is covered in the framework? Who makes the legal framework? And at the end of the day, what do we achieve out of it? So that's the friend we are going to have today's focus. With this, let me start with the next slide. Now, I don't think I need to introduce myself because I have gone through my introduction last time. Friends, my name is Batra and Krishan Batra, and I have been working with private sector and public sectors for the 4 decades, I could say. And now presently I'm looking after ISM-India activities, and to a lot extent I work with many of the companies in India and even abroad, still even. Now coming back to today's agenda. The very first thing what we're going to talk about is introduction to the government organization public procurement. So when we're talking of the big organizations within the governments who are doing the procurement, we would like to introduce them. Then we're going to talk about the role of government in procurement. We discussed in the last session the value, the size, and we said it's a big procurement, big value. So when 25% of the GDP of the country is controlled by the government, so what is the role of the government in procurements around? And we also discussed there's a need to have a framework. So framework means we're talking about the guideline, we're talking of the modules, we're talking about the legal issues. We're going to talk all those things around. Then we're going to talk about the legal implication of public procurements. So when we talk of legal implications, are there any legal issues around this? Because procurement is, at the end of the day, it leads to a contract. You're contracting with private companies. So that certainly if there's disputes could happen in today's life, how do we handle it? So you need a framework. So there's a legal framework, and then we also will walk through the legal implications. But then we'll also talk about the legal aspect of the sales of goods. You're selling the goods. There's a buyer, there's a seller. So when we talk of a buyer and seller, certainly somebody is paying money and somebody is taking the possession. Somebody is taking the ownership. So we'll walk through some of the key points around. Lastly, we'll also talk about arbitration and conciliation. Now, arbitration is the age-old concepts around. You might have seen in the good old days, any fight happens in a village, there used to be some head of the society who will do the negotiation between the two parties. That's what we used to call negotiation. Then the dispute became more complex, and those disputes we will take it to the court, and we all know any legal litigation process is very long. It could take ages. So once that approach is there around, which I know in our day-to-day life, civil life, we have many litigation cases. But those companies which are coming and those who want immediate result, they want immediate solution. For them, the arbitration is very popular. Conciliation also has been incorporated in the Indian system now. So these are the new tools. We'll walk through it. When to use arbitration, how to use arbitration, who does it, and then about conciliation also. Because many of the MNCs which are coming to India, they don't want to go into the litigation process. The litigation process could take you 10 years, 15 years, by the time the company might have even closed down. So they prefer arbitration and conciliation. Well, friends, the objective of the whole today's session is to mitigate the legal risk. So we have a framework, we have legal guidelines. So the focus behind all that will be how to cut down, how to reduce the legal risk, and in addition ensure compliance. In a country of our size, the government machinery is doing procurement, state government is doing procurement, municipalities are doing procurement, panchayats are doing procurements. So you can imagine you need a consistency. You need something to ensure compliance and everybody follows proper guidelines. That's the objective around this. Well, friend, with this again I welcome you all, and let's start with our today's agenda. The very first thing comes up is introduction to government organizations. Obviously the question comes, we're talking about the framework, we're talking about the legal issues. Who makes it? In government machinery, there are three pillars around. One is called legislature, second is executive arms, third is the judiciary arm. All are independent. Legislature arms mean who makes the laws, who makes the bill. And we all know the parliament is there, Rajya Sabha is there. Obviously in parliament we have the elected members. In Rajya Sabha we have the representative from states. So these are the two groups around who form the bills, who takes care of legislature part. Any law, any rules, they are the one who frame it. But once it is framed, there's an executive arm. Who runs the country? Who runs the state? At the country level, we have the prime ministers who have the ministries. Obviously, each ministry has got their guidelines. They spend the money. Then even under the ministry, there are public sector undertakings. So those public sector undertakings also spend the money around. Then we have at the national level, state level, the chief ministers around, their ministries. Then we can go at the local level, the municipality level. So these are the executive arms. And these executive arms, they spend the money. So legislature makes the laws, they make the bills, executive arm spends it. And lastly is, if there any dispute happens in any contract, they go to the judiciary arm. So these are three distinct pillars. So when I look at the parliament and state legislature, I mean, as I said to you, they make the laws around. All government is done by the executive arm, all the government work. And we also talked about the public sector undertaking, which you are very clear, like BHEL is there. All the big units are there around. So they do a lot of procurements as well. Let's go down to the next one, the public procurement in India. If we look around the public procurement in India, the major players, obviously defense is one of them. Railways is another big one. And CPWD is Central Public Works Division is also their big ones, which is the part of under the Urban Development Ministry. And then there are big PSUs also, public sector undertakings, Now PSU could be under the central government, PSUs could be also under the state governments. The big ones like BHEL, if I won't talk around, they're all big. And they are, since they're using the taxpayer money, they have to comply with the guidelines. There's another big organization is called DGS&D, Directorate General Supply and Divisions. Now this is basically people who are recruited. They are in the supply chain professions. They do the procurement on behalf of various governments. In addition, they also set up the rate contract. I'm sure you must be aware, they do the setup of the rate contract. In the US also we have a similar arm they call GSA, General Services Administration. So that's a division whose job is to see around in US, which is the item which are bought regularly. They try to set up the long-term arrangements. They try to identify the good suppliers. They try to do the blacklisting of the suppliers, and then each state can use them. So we avoid the duplication of work. So in India also we have DGS&D, whose job is to develop the rate contract, also to take care of procurements. So in addition, state governments takes care of procurement, as I said to you in the beginning. So all these organizations, the major organizations, have set up their own guidelines. Now, when we talk of the framework, which I again clarified in the last time, the need for the framework. As I said in the beginning, we are a big buyer and diversity is too much. State level, national level, local level, you need some framework. Now these framework comprises of three pillars again. The theoretical part, the professional part and academic framework, the legal framework, and central government framework. Now the theoretical, professional, somebody does the research, some institution does some research, and they try to emphasize the need for certification. They identified the need for professionalism in this field. When we are controlling such a big budget, we are the biggest buyer. So naturally this profession requires people who are certified, people who are qualified. Not every person can become a procurement person or supply chain person. They need to go through some training. Like somebody, we were having yesterday one webinar. So the question comes, why should I need a certification? I always say, if I look back, because since I've spent 4 decades in this field, if I go in 1970s, 80s, I won't have mentioned that much around. Procurement was very simple. 3 quotations, lowest price, very well done. But now the procurement concept has evolved a lot. It has become much more complex. And then on top of it is becoming globalizations. So keeping those factors in mind, and the new tools are coming around, like reverse auction has come up around. I know the bidding is still very popular. The new concept of supplier relation managements are coming around. So those tools, and then e-procurement is coming in a big way. So these tools require people who are professionally qualified. So procurement is not same the way it used to be 25, 30 years back. It is on the path of becoming very modernized, becoming very specialized. So you need a certification, you need some qualification. So that's the very first pillar which is supposed to do some R&D work on this. The next pillar comes the legal framework. Obviously, when so many people are involved, I mean about the India's system, what they say around, we have 7 million people in India. 7 million. This is a figure which World Bank worked it out through the survey. 7 million people in India that are involved in procurement activities in one way or another way. So 7 million is not a small figure. So naturally, when so many people are contracting around, dealing with suppliers, dealing with other peoples, you need a legal framework. So potentials of disputes are always there around. The next one comes the central government's framework. So the central government framework means somebody has to develop the manual, somebody has to develop the guidelines, somebody has to give procedures, what is the step 1, step 2, step 3. That's what we do around. Now the legal framework comes, the relevant provisions. Obviously when we are designing the legal framework, you really take some from the constitutions of India. Indian constitution says about equity. Everybody is equal. Irrespective what background we come from, we are all equal. That means everybody has a right to participate in these bidding process. Everybody has a fundamental rights. So those guidelines have been built into the legal framework. If somebody is not happy with the process, they can raise a voice. They can say, guys, this process was not very honestly done. This was not a fair process. So those issues from the Constitution of India, we have included into the legal framework. Then contracts, I will explain a little much more detail around. Then public procurement law. Now this bill has been waiting with the central government. Still it has not become the law. It doesn't mean that we don't have the guideline, we don't have the procedures. We have the guidelines, but the still law is not there around. So which was still with the parliaments around. We expect maybe this year or next year this will be approved around. What the law covers, it covers the broad principles. The broad principle I told in the last session also. Transparencies, competitions, cost-effective procurement, all those principles remain there. But does not apply to emergency procurement. Keep in mind these broad principles which we have, they do not apply to emergency. Suddenly there's an earthquake. We are not going to look into the compliance part. Obviously somebody is going to do the vigilance later on, whether it was done correctly or not, whether the funds were wasted or not. But we have to see first, the objective is taking care of people on the emergency procurement. So in those situations, sometimes these principles don't work. National security, even there also this may not work. The next comes the mercantile law. Actually, if you look back, the legal framework has been in India since the British time. So they left up with us the rule, the British law, the Contract Act, which goes back to 1862. It did cover on the sale of goods, but that was not very well elaborated. So there's a mercantile law which talks about the sale of goods around. When you sell the goods, somebody is paying money and somebody is becoming ownership. Those clarity has been brought into the mercantile law. If I'm buying a food items, is it good food? Is it bad food? Is it digestible? All those things are covered into the mercantile law around. The legal framework. Now the legal framework, obviously central government framework is there, public procurement divisions to regulate it. So there is a PBDD department which has been set up now. Their job is to regulate it, monitor it. You also know very well the world is changing very fast. You can't have one legal framework for the lifetime. It has to change with the time. Nowadays the focus is all about e-commerce. So contracts are done also in an e-way. Approvals are also done in an e-way. So the legal framework has to be updated. So somebody has to monitor it, reform it and professionalize it. So that's the one they do around. There's another portal around, Central Public Procurement Portal. As in a country of our size, so many ministries, so many public sectors, so many state governments, national levels, local levels. Where do they advertise? If we say one side we want transparencies, where should they advertise? Obviously they do advertise in the newspaper, but there's a one common portal for the whole country. So this is called CPPP. So everybody has to put, depending on the threshold, depending on the amount of the contract, people have to post it on those portals around. So every advertisement has to be put on the portal around. The next one we have on the framework around is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So naturally, as you saw last time about the coal issues and other issues around, so that's another framework which looks at it if they feel that this is really going in a proper way, the procurement or not. The Vigilance Commission, they looks into this. Framework for grievance redressal. If somebody has a grievance, some supplier feels I'm not being treated well, they can take up the issue with this group around. Then there's also framework for the best practices rules. So this group is supposed to look around what are the best practices worldwide to do a procurement. Should I do the competitive process every time? Can I use e-auction approach around? Can I do limited international bidding or not? So that's the one, it looks at the best practices around which is relevant for the countries. Then they also develop the guidelines and manuals. So this is all put together, becomes the legal framework. Now, since we still don't have the law, public procurement law, though it means, as you know, the custodian of the taxpayer money is the finance. Procurement people are spending money, but the custodian is the finance. So they have General Financial Rules 2005, and they control the process part for the time being till the law comes into operation. So GFR, which is a book covering around 200 pages around, it gives you the fundamental principle of public buying, methods to maintain the transparencies, procurement of civil works, how do I do it, hiring of consultants, government also hires consultants, public sectors also hires many times consultants, how do we hire them? Inventory management, and then the contract management's around, that's the way around. Since GFR is only covering the fundamental principles, the key principles, it does not really go into details. Then so this is supplemented by 3 manuals of the Finance Ministry to cover the goods, services and works. So if some of you might have worked with the World Bank, you might have seen the World Bank also got a green book and the red book. So one covers about the goods, one covers about the services part. Same way these people, Finance Ministry also has developed their own manuals. Now next comes up the legal implication of public procurement. As I said to you in the beginning, the procurement is nothing but a commercial transaction. So that commercial means it's becoming a legal transaction. Anything which is commercial, there's a transaction of payment, there's a transaction of change of goods from one place to another, movement of the goods from one place to another. It's all about the legal transaction. Now there are a number of laws around to cover various commercial aspects of the contracts. Now Indian Contract Act is the one major one I said to you, I said 1862. It goes back to 1872. Now Indian Contract Act is based on English common law. In the whole world, if you look around, there are only 2 laws. One, some countries who are using the English common law as a base. They have updated depending on their local needs. In India also, we took up from 1872, but this has been updated and changed depending on the needs around. But then there are some countries who follow the civil law. English common law, I would say wherever the British people were ruling, those countries have by default adopted the common law. Because most of the lawyers in those days were trained by the British system. So they have adopted the common law. Even in the USA also it is a common law. So in the whole Northern America, I would say, is all about the common law. Canada, US. The civil law is done more in the Europe, some parts of Europe. Russia is there, Rome is there, Italy is there. So those countries are following the civil law. So there are, you can say the worldwide, there are 2 parts. One who are based on the English common law and some who are using the civil law. So India's also still uses 1872 Act, but this has been updated and upgraded depending with the time. Then we have come up later on with the Sale of Goods Act in 1930. Then 1996 we came with the arbitrations. When the more and more MNCs were coming in India, more and more big companies were coming to India. So naturally they can't work on our Indian Contracts Act going to the litigation process. They came with arbitrations, conciliations. So that's the process they follow around. Now contracts, as I said to you, are the basis of many of our daily activities. Any daily activities we do leads to a contract. You say someone, I'm selling my motorcycle. Other says, okay, I'll buy it. I'll pay you 5,000 rupees. Contract gets formed. You say, okay, I'm selling my house. Somebody says, okay, I take it. So if you look around in your day-to-day life also, every transaction, every activity you do where there's a consideration one side, commitment from other side, it leads into a contract. I will take a few cases around with you when it becomes a contract and when it becomes just casual. Somebody will say, but I've got 3 cars I want to sell you. You can take any one. The other one says, okay, I'll buy it. And I'll pay you 5,000 rupees. The contract is not formed. Because there was no clarity, which car, what specs. So there has to be very specific informations. Other side also there has to be some specific commitment, okay, I'll pay you. So that makes into a contract. Somebody says, guys, okay, I'm giving a free dinner to you in the evening. Other one says, okay, I'll join you. But the first one guy doesn't come. Can the second guy drag them to the court? You told me and I went there, I spent money, give my money back. So those are the situations, it doesn't form a contract. So I'll walk into those details. What forms a contract? I think it's a wonderful subject for procurement people to understand. I know they're not the lawyers, but since they are the one who are dealing with the suppliers, each and every activity what they sign is becoming a contract. So they really need to know at least what forms a contract. What becomes a legal contract? There's a word called agreement. I say something to you and you agree, we reach into agreement. But that agreement is not a legally enforceable contract. So I would say the last wording you can see in this slide also, without enforceable contract, commerce would collapse. Everybody will back out. So in a commercial world, the contracts have to be enforceable. Those are few who are dealing with contracting on a day-to-day basis. They need to really show who is going to be accountable at the end of the day if something goes wrong. Now here I will spend some time to understand what is a contract, what forms a contract, and then normally we do a separate session which we call as legal implication of procurement, which goes into all the key issues of legal part. But in your course content, the focus is very limited to understand the key, what forms a contract and the key clauses of the contracts around. So as I said to you, contract is an agreement between two parties who have created an obligation to perform a particular duty, but is enforceable by law. That's very important around. It's legally enforceable. Now, what forms a contract? There are key components for that. The very first component is offer. So somebody has to give an offer to you. So we have to really look around who makes the offer. Is it the procurement person making the offer or the supplier making the offer? If supplier is making offer to you and you accept it, also the contract is formed. But the only risk in that one is when supplier is making the offer, supplier has put down his own terms and conditions, and the moment you accept it, that means you are accepting the terms and conditions of the supplier, which you may not have even read it. You all know very well the terms and conditions are at the back of the POs in a very small fonts. Most of the time even we don't read it. So one has to be very careful who makes the offer around and who makes the acceptance around. Now in this example you can say, I will mow your lawn this weekend if you pay me 300 rupees. So there is an offer. Acceptance, they say you have got a deal. The guy has accepted it. So the contract is formed. So there is a fixed price. There is a fixed workload. So the contract is formed around. The next point comes the consideration. The consideration means the money has to be there. The value received and given. That's what we call the consideration. So I'll be coming soon on the point like gift. I give a gift to someone. Is it a contract? Because then it's only one-sided. So we have to go into the factor on what makes why consideration is important around. Like say sometimes we hire a consultant and consultant says I will work with you free of cost. If it is free, the legally contract is not valid. That is why you must have seen we make the contract for 1 rupee even. Or in the US they will say $1 contract. So there has to be consideration. Some money has to be there around. Just free means no consideration. No consideration means no contract. Now here, I'm just trying to give you broader pictures around. In the legal issues, when we cover in a very broad way, detailed way, I know the course content doesn't cover what forms a contract, how to implement a contract, how to secure the contract performance, termination and remedies. If somebody is terminating it, what are the remedies for that? What is breach of contract, terms and conditions, and drafting a contract, how to draft a contract. So, Elda, this is not part of your course, but I just want to give you a bigger picture. This is what it covers in a broad way. But we certainly plan to do a one session purely on the legal issues sometime later. Now, how the whole process starts now. All of you know very well that you try to advertise your needs first. You try to invite people, guys, give me an offer. Now, how do you invite? Either you advertise, you say we're trying to make a highway covering around 200 kilometers from this place to this place. Here are the specifications. Those interested, please send us the sealed bids around, the sealed tenders around. Or you say, okay, I'm trying to buy 100 computers. Those interested may give me my offers by this date. Sealed offers, closed offers, this is what you do. So the whole game starts from invitation to make an offer. So the whole game of this one starts from inviting them to make an offer. Now, this is where you can see in this one also, slide, announcement of the auction, call for tenders. There's a word called prospectus. Some of the companies, or even the government, they want to launch some bonds, securities, they want to get the money. That's more, prospectus is also an offer. Then people invest into this, so they become acceptance. So there are sometimes commercial advertisements. And commercial advertisement can we see that they are also the offer. Like in example, I can see here around, somebody sends you the price list. The price list is not an offer. So keep that factor in mind. But somebody displays the item on the window in the shop along with the price, that's an offer. So you have to really understand what makes an offer. First we start with the invitation to make an offer. While in the book you will see it's called proposal, but we are calling it invitation to make an offer. Then based on the invitations, based on your tender notice, based on your whole call for the tenders, you get some offers around. Now you get the proposal, I would say, around, and then based on the proposal you make an offer. So my request to you again is, offer should start from the buyer. So you technically make official offer on your POs, on your contract. The other guy has to accept it. That is why you must have seen when you make a PO, you expect other party to send you approval in writing after signature, saying that I accept the PO. The reason for that is when offer goes from you, the terms and conditions are yours as a buyer. So that means the acceptance from the supplier side, they do accept your terms and conditions. The chain could be reversed also. If supplier is giving offer to you, or in that offer they are putting their terms and conditions, and then if you accept it, that means you are bound by their terms and conditions. And possibility is there you might not have read the terms and conditions. I remember some days back when I used to be in the UN, I made a very clear understanding around that in the purchase order, don't mention that this refers to your offer, blah, blah. Because that means the starting point becomes their offer. You write down your specification, you write down your requirements, put down the price. I know the price is given by the supplier, but then send to the supplier, let supplier accept it. So it becomes a very clear offer from you, other side accepting it. The offer could be express, implied. It could be also implied declaration. Offer mean I give the offer to you in writing. It could be implied mean I have taken the goods from you and started using it. And I have paid the money to you. It's implied. It could be oral, it could be also in writing. So both are legally enforceable. The only problem comes in oral is, how do we prove it? So this is why sometimes to avoid these disputes around, we encourage people in procurement. I know sometimes they are under pressure. They want to tell the supplier, oh, your contract is approved. Go ahead, work on it. But then we find later on, the management comes up, sorry, we don't have budget, we don't have funds, cancel it. But in the meantime, the buyer has already conveyed the message to the successful bidder. Suppose if I'm a successful bidder and you have conveyed me already, oh, your contract is approved. I've started working on it. But in the meantime, I find after 2 weeks, the government has rejected the contract for some reason. Either there was a dispute or there was a complaint from somebody. You could get into troubles. So my request to you in public procurement, stick with written contract around. Now this terms again, I think we have to be very clear on the purchase order versus contract. Is the purchase order a contract? When you send the purchase order as a buyer, it's an offer. But the moment purchase order is accepted, it becomes a contract. Because the two parties have accepted it. So once it is accepted, it becomes a contract. I know when we normal life we use around contract mean the one which is done for consultant, which is done for others, two parties signing together, that is also contract. But the PO is also contract the moment it is approved by the buyer, seller. There's a term here you see around agreement. So agreement is there, okay, two parties have made an agreement, I'll do this, I'll pay you this. But that agreement becomes only once it is enforceable by law. If it is not enforceable by law, enforceable mean I might be doing a wrong thing which is legally not allowed. I might be dealing with drugs, I might be dealing with the wrong things. So in those situations, those contracts are invalid, we call them void. There's another term called battle of forms. In contracting, those people of you, some of you might have gone to the law school, this term is taught to everybody around, the battle of forms. You send an offer, you say, sorry, change this. That means you make a counter offer. Counter offer goes, other guys say change this. Again counter offer. So till it is a mirror image, that means the offer and acceptance has to be mirror image. No dots and comma difference around. The moment you make a difference, it is not a mirror image. So we call as a battle of forms. So keep that factor in mind. Revoking the offer. Sometimes what happens, you send the offer and then suddenly somebody gives you bright ideas around, please don't do it, and you want to revoke it. Can you revoke it? At what stage you can revoke it? That's what we will be talking around. So here again I'm trying to clarify, offer is, it has to be very specific, very definite, it can't be vague. As I told you in the beginning that I'm say, okay, I've got 3 cars, I say, okay, I'm selling my car. Which car? I've not spelled out. I'm not very specific. And the other party is accepted. But I'm not very specific. So the contract can't be, offer is not really good. It indicates that upon acceptance by the offeree, there are 2 words, offerer and offeree. Offerer means the guy who's offering it. Like you're making the POs, you're offerer. Offeree means the guy who's accepting it is offeree. So the binding effect of the contract, not binding effect. So this is what we'll be talking later. Rules with respect to offers. The offer is not required to be in a specific format around, keep in mind. Although in our day-to-day language, we always say offer means the PO, but offer could be also by email. It is not necessarily the word PO. If somebody send an email around, I'm pleased to offer you this, please send me your acceptance and go ahead. That's also offer. Verbal also is an offer. So there is no particular format around. The person who makes the offer is called offerer. The person who accepts it is called offeree. An offer can be made to one or more persons. You can also make offer to the whole world. You say, guys, this is my offer. Who can score this? Who can pass this exam? I'll give them free scholarship on this. So the offer could be to the whole world also. So it can be to a person, to the whole world around. All terms of the offer must be communicated to the offeree. The offeree means supplier, if you want to see in that context around. Now the termination of the offer. I'm sure you must have come across many times situations. You send the offer because you are under pressure, but then suddenly somebody comes, the top pressure. Either somebody has made a complaint, the legal dispute has come up, and the top management says, guys, we will not work on it. They want to stop it. It happens very oftenly that you have gone ahead and suddenly somebody is connected with X and Y, makes a complaint about the whole process, and then you want to revoke it. The offer will lapse if acceptance is not made. The moment acceptance is made by the supplier or offeree, you can't terminate it. A counter offer is made. If somebody supplier has given the counter offer to you, then also you can terminate it. Offer can be revoked at any time before acceptance, or if communicated to the offeree. If you have already communicated to the offeree for some reason that you are trying to terminate it, then also it's rejected now. This gives you a little bigger picture of that. It shows you the termination of the offer. It can be obviously rejected. If it is a conditional offer, other guy is not accepting it, again that can be terminated. Offer acceptance has not come when you mentioned that I want acceptance within 1 week. If you don't come within a week, that means this is lapsed. But the guy has given the offer to you that I will give you a beautiful house at this price, and the guy has died. The death of the offeree and offerer, both, it could be anyone, whom it was offered and who offered it. If one of them dies, the offer is terminated. And then I said to you earlier, revocation also can be done. You can revoke it. Now revocation of the offer by the offerer, rejection of the offer by the same. So same thing which I showed you in the previous graph is put into this text around. So maybe I can skip this one here. Now here again comes up parties to a contract. There's an offerer, offeree. You may call buyer, seller. Now there are two people around, offerer is giving offer, offeree is giving acceptance. Sometimes we get confused with this around. Offerer could be a supplier and then you say, I become the offeree. But really, like, I mean, if sense you look around, you're the person putting money. You're funding it. You will like to be called offerer. And the other guy who's delivering the goods to you or service to you will be called offeree. Because once you become offerer, your terms and condition becomes the commanding one. And they basically dictate the whole contract around. If tomorrow there's a dispute. So finalizing the agreements. So you have made the agreements. It is already, department has approved. Additional necessary approvals are required. As you know, in the public sectors, you need approvals around. Offer has come. The other guy has accepted it. And now you're getting approvals within the organizations after that. So these are the 4 key areas around. So we said around 4 elements of a contract. There has to be an agreement, obviously between the buyer and supplier. There has to be an agreement. An agreement means mirror image, no minor change even, no comma dot change around. Just the acceptance of as it is. Otherwise it becomes a counter offer. Consideration. There has to be price element. As I told you, somebody says, I work as a free consultant. Legally not enforceable. But the moment you say $1 or 1 rupee, as a consideration, it becomes a legal contract. So there has to be consideration. Lawful object. So whatever you're doing contracting, it has to be legally allowed in the country. If those activities are not allowed, they are illegal activities. You cannot do contract further. You can't drag the other party to the court because it's illegal. It is, contract is void, I would say. Contractual capacity. The capacity of the party who are doing contract. The one guy may be a minor guy, less than 18 years. Those people can't enter into a contract. Second, the person may be mentally not stable, very old person, or mental problems around. If somebody is mentally not safe, good, they cannot enter into a contract around. In the legal ground, they will not be accepted. So consideration, now obviously the consideration must be mutual. Both parties must receive something of value. Involvement of money is not required. It could be some benefits to both of them. You say, okay, you do for me this, I will do in return for this. So there is a benefit for both. Contract versus gift. In a gift is all one-sided. Other side, there may be not any benefits around. There may be intangible benefits, but technically on paper there's no benefit. So that's the difference around between the contracts and gifts. Prerequisites. Now when we talk of agreement, we have to be very clear. I mean, the legal intentions are very important around, formalities, and must have free consent of the parties around. Both parties should give a free consent. It can't be we call as a threat by the party. Somebody comes to you with a stroke of a gun, with a knife, says, guys, sign it. So those, even if you sign, later on you can say, I was under pressure. So those under threat is called coercion. So those agreements are not legible. I mean, they are void, I would call it. Undue influence. Somebody says, I'm connected to so and so. If you don't do this, I'll do this. I mean, to some extent it's a threat, but it's not a physical threat. They may damage you in futures. So that's the way they try to use their position for advantage. Yeah, I'm a big man in the society, and they try to put undue influence around. Obviously fraud, somebody has given wrong data, wrong facts. You call the supplier and supplier gives you wrong facts. So those are the fraud situations around. Misrepresentation, they're representing wrongly. So in those situations, if later on you find the contract could be void, contract could be null and void. The competent to contract, I have already told you, the parties must be competent. Not less than the age of 18 under the common law, mentally sound. So those are the ones they are competent to contracts around. And the next, also there's a competency part. Sometimes you're signing a contract on behalf of the company. Question comes, are you authorized? Are you legally authorized to sign on behalf of the company? This also means you are competent to contract. Must have lawful considerations and objects around. Now the terms and conditions, it runs into big numbers. If I look back to my experience in the public sectors, I'm sure you also have got 25 to 30 terms and conditions. But I think in the course content of PDPP, we are talking the major ones, which as a procurement person you need to know around. The word called liquidated damages. Now, the word is liquidate. You mean you calculate the damages well in advance. When you are buying something, if those items get delayed, obviously somebody has to pay the price for that. You're buying for a society. You're buying for the infrastructures. The road is to be made around, highway has to be made, and that it is delayed by delayed months and months. So somebody has to pay the price for that. But if you just go and say, okay, I want to penalize you alone, it's not going to fly with the common law. So you have to put this upfront in the contract. The time is the essence of the contract. And if there is a delay, you will be penalized, you could call, or you will have to have liquid damages would be around 0.5, 0.75, you can do it. I'm just put down the normally it is 0.5, 0.5% of the value per week. The total value may be whatever, 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 0.5% of that every week. And if this becomes 0.5% 1 week delay, second week delay means it becomes 1%. And it goes on adding up. So in 20 weeks it becomes 10%. After that you have full right to terminate it. So some people are smart enough, they even write it here, that this delay is not allowed more than 3 weeks or 2 weeks, particularly those who are dealing with some, nature calamities around. So they say, guys, if you delay it more than 4 or 5 weeks, I have full rights to buy from another bidder, who's number 2 bidder, whose prices were higher. All the difference you will have to pay. So one side the contract is terminated. Second side, the difference between the L1 and L2, and if you're going to the contractor, L2 has to be paid by L1. So those type of clauses also are spelled out. And I have seen many times we have used it in the word procurements around. Second comes the force majeure. It's a French word. I mean, it's normally used to be called the act of God. Guys, sorry I could not deliver you. What's the reasons? Not that you are sick or you are this. Something which is beyond your control. So the beyond the control is only few things. In the good old days, it was all about act of God, but now they've expanded it to cover the war, government actions. War is obviously, there's a war going on in the country, with a neighboring country or something. Suddenly the war has come up. You can't drag the company to the court. So act of God, flood could happen, earthquake could happen, war is there around, government action, government decides that we will not like to export any of our things to this country. So naturally, suddenly the action comes to you that to stop the whole export part for that. So force majeure mean under these conditions you could be saved yourself, guys, sorry I could not perform for so and so reasons. So nobody, you won't be penalized for that now. Now the modification of T&C. Now once the contract is concluded, and we all know very well, after the contract has been signed, approved, everything, suddenly somebody tells you, can you make this minor change on this? Can you change the specification there and there? So those are also part of it. Substitution happen, which is called novation. So you keep these terms, cancel partly or fully, again desiccation, or alter the some contract alterations. So these do happen around. So there's a word called conditions and warranties. See, if you look around in the whole terms and conditions, some are conditions. Everything is a term. That's not an issue around. Everything what you have is all a terms. Liquidated damage is a terms, payment is a term, everything is a term. Can you subcontract or not is also a term. But then those terms, some are conditions, some are warranties. Conditions are the core of the contract. If those don't happen, contract can be terminated. Warranties mean something quality problem happen, some other thing happen, where the supplier is willing to change it. Those are the warranties part. So those are the warranties area, and then there are conditions part. So you have to look around which are the terms which come under the conditions, which comes under warranties. Condition means they are the core of the contract. Without that, the contract cannot happen. So that's the way it is. The law of the agencies around. In the whole game, there are agent and principal. Like, who can enter into the contract? You might be working with the government, you might be working with a UN agency, you might be working with any other public sector, or in the private sector. The agent is an authorized person on behalf of the company. Agent is a person who is authorized on behalf of the government to sign the contract, to enter into contract on behalf of the principal. So the principal could be the name of your department. The principal could be the name of the agencies. The principal could be the NGO. But then somebody is signing the contract. So somebody could sign the contract around. That's very important around. Now agent has no liabilities. Keep in mind, agent has no liability in the sense, if I'm been authorized by the company to sign or to enter into agreements, so then I'm not accountable. I'm doing in the good faith. If something I'm doing on the good faith, agent is not agent is accountable to the principal, that's fine, but not outside. But if I've done some criminal issues around, then obviously agent is accountable. So same thing can happen on the other side. Now here we are talking on the buyer side. If you look at the supplier side also, somebody is signing the contract on behalf of company X and Y. He's an also agent. The principal could be like if I say around Suzuki, Honda, they are the principal. But then somebody signing on their behalf, they are the agents. So both sides, agents are not accountable per se until they're involved in purely there's a neglect, there's a misconduct, or criminal issues, then yes, it's an issue. Call for authority, the person submitting offers. So sometimes it's good. I know sometimes people say, guys, from the supplier might be saying, okay, I accept it. And later on you find the guy has left the company and you say your person said, and the owners of the company, the heads of the company, they don't know it. They say, who offered you? Who did this? So sometime you may like to get as a precaution, guys, give me the authority. Are you having authority to sign it or not? Now, we covered already the Act of 1872, which is based on English common law. I covered the only 2 or 3 points, while there might be many terms which will call for a separate session on that. Sale of Goods Act. Now, this basically came up for agreement for the sale of goods are governed by the contract law. Agreement is covered from that. How there are certain features like transfer of ownership, quality aspects are not covered in that act around. So Act of 1872 will not touch about the transfer, will not cover the quality aspects. So that's what covered on the sales of goods around. So the gaps which I'm talking about are covered in this act. Now, another thing I want to talk around is Incoterms. When we're talking of sale, we're talking of a global sale today. It is not local sale all the time. The world is becoming a common village now, and people can buy from any part of the world, except they may have to pay the custom duties or other duties around, but things can come from any part of the world. This is where one needs to know, before I talk of sales of the Sale Goods Act around, there's the Incoterms around. Although the term is international, but this can be used for domestic also. So there are, in the good old days, it was purely for international trade. But now this has been extended under the 2010 Incoterms. It can be also used for domestic. So any shipment, any movement of the goods, they come under these Incoterms. Now these Incoterms, before I walk around, obviously somebody is packing it from the step 1, you can say, somebody is loading it, somebody is doing transportations, custom clearance in case of exports. If there's no export, then moves on further. Somebody is handling it, insurance has to be there around, custom clearance on the other side, on the one is export side, one is import side, final transportation, unloading. Anywhere the risk could happen. Who is accountable? The truck may lead into accident. The truck may get overturned. The ship may get overturned. Who is accountable? So those issues are becoming equally important in today's transactions around. So Incoterm has developed various terms around, and these terms have to be used depending on whether you are doing domestic transportations, international transportations, and there are only 3 letters in this. Like the first one you see EXW, EXW. Next one is free carriers, CPT, SIP, DAT, DAP, DAP, then DDP. These are the ones we can use for any mode of transportations. Other one we use for only shipping. Free alongside ship, free on board, cost and freight, cost insurance and freight. So all these terms put together, each terms have a meaning. It's a legal international meaning. Who's accountable for what? What are the responsibilities of each one? So these terms, by putting 3 letters and the destination, you clarify who's going to be accountable. Now here comes the doctrine of caveat emptor. The caveat emptor means basically this is a Latin word, buyers to be aware. So caveat emptor means like a catchy word, guys. You have to be aware. They must act with due diligence. So buyers you are, but you have to be act with a very due diligence. Supplier could conceal the defects. Supplier sends you something, conceals it nicely. The casting is having a lot of blowholes. The guy has filled it nicely, painted it nicely. It looks beautiful, but when you start using it, then you start finding the blows comes out. The paint falls off. And by the time the payment has been made. So you have to cover up, when we talk of sale, the condition as to description, fit for use, condition of merchantability, condition of wholesomeness. There's the international sales of good also. UN has developed this. Indian arbitration, this is the last one before we come to the question answers. Now, so far we all know about the litigation process. Litigation process, the companies can't wait. So the companies have come up with ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. So the dispute arbitration, the very popular one which has become now popular, I would say arbitration. And this arbitration is based on UNCITRAL, which is again United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. They developed the arbitration guidelines. So each country has taken the UNCITRAL as a base. Keeping the local laws, they have developed their own arbitration guidelines. So India also has developed their own arbitration guideline based on UNCITRAL. Now this is the oldest method of settling the disputes, quicker than litigation process. Instead of litigating the matter, then you refer the matter to an independent arbitrator. So there's a supplier side, there's a buyer side. Buyer will decide one arbitrator, supplier will decide one arbitrator. Those two arbitrators will decide a third one which is acceptable to both of them. So the person appointed are called arbitrator. If it is only one arbitrator, is arbitrator. But if it's becoming a tribunal, 3 people are there, it's becoming a tribunal. And the proceedings are called arbitrator proceeding. Now appointment, as I told you, this can be done. I put my arbitrator as a buyer, you as a supplier put down your arbitrators. So both come with a third one which could be decided by the Supreme Court, could be done by the High Court. So this is the way we call third one. You can challenge also. If you feel that this arbitrator, I'm not comfortable, this arbitrator is biased against me about my company, you could obviously challenge it. So the conduct of arbitrator proceedings, the language, what language will be there? Will it be conducted in local languages? Will it be conducted in English? Where it will be done? The companies might be based in Singapore, the company might be based in Malaysia, might be based in USA or India, but the buyer is in X country. The two are different places. You have to decide the venue upfront. If any problem happens, what language we will use for arbitrations, where it will be done, and this is what we do around. So there's an award. Obviously, even after award, if you feel you are not happy, as usual, you can recourse. You can look for recourse. But recourse has to be done within 3 months. Silent doesn't mean anything. If you don't do any 3 months, you have to accept it. There's no choice around it. So because these are very time bound, it's not a litigation process where you can go on dragging it for a long. But now the new concept has come up around is conciliation. Conciliation is something like closer to negotiation, like 2 parties are fighting. I become the third one. I negotiate between the 2. So negotiation was very informal process. Conciliation becomes a little formal process. Something like that, but much easier. 2 parties agree, okay, he's our conciliator, he or she is our conciliator. We have a respect for that one, and they decided. Less adversarial proceeding, it is faster than even arbitration process. This is that. Well, friend, with this, I think we have covered all the issues. I want to thank you for your patient hearing. I hope it was useful. But again, I want to say now we will have a Q&A session. So I know it's supposed to be 15 minutes, but I will give you more time. Whatever question you have, please raise up. You're welcome for that. Our plan is that we plan to do 2 sessions we have covered already after covering today's. Then we're going to have in the month of February 2 sessions. And by March, I want to complete all the 6 sessions required for doing PDPP. 6 which are the core session. So I'll try to cover that way.